Hey guys, the most outrageous aristocracy of bodily functions in medieval Europe, when farting had to be graded and dandruff could be considered a sacred object. Are you ready to be refreshed? Tonight we are not going to talk about serious history, but how medieval nobles turned the most primitive physiological needs of human beings into the most exaggerated aristocratic etiquette. Imagine that a certain great duke is solemnly tuning his farts, while his servants kneel on the ground to record the pitch of each note. This is even more outrageous than a modern talent show. Welcome to the crazy world of aristocracy of bodily functions in the Middle Ages, where even digging earwax can dig out a title. Now, please dim the lights, turn on the aromatherapy machine, preferably the authentic medieval aristocratic fragrance, mixed with leather, roses, and a little bit of rotten meat. And imagine that you are standing in the banquet hall of the Medici family in Florence in 1492. The air is filled with body odor that cannot be covered by 37 spices, and the candlelight casts a swaying light and shadow on the gilded toilet. The attendants held silver spittoons as if they were facing a great enemy, because the highlight of the night was about to begin, the noble burp concert. In the corner, the royal body odor assessor was carefully collecting the personal fragrance of each guest with a peacock feather fan, while the archbishop solemnly announced, "Next, please invite His Excellency the Duke to perform his signature C major series of burps." Wait, do you think this is outrageous enough? This is just the beginning. In the bizarre world of medieval nobles, the higher your toilet, the higher your status. The larger your dandruff, the purer your bloodline. The mellower your body odor, the more noble you are. Even your earwax can be a diplomatic gift. Want to know why medieval nobles were so obsessed with these disgusting body functions? It all started in the era when there was no social media and no luxury logos. When the external way of showing off wealth was restricted by the ban on luxury, the nobles could only focus on their innate talents. Thus, the most heavy-tasting involution in history began. Are you ready? Let's lift the velvet curtain embroidered with gold thread and enter this absurd world where even farts have to be in rhythm. Warm reminder. You may feel strong discomfort, hiccups from laughter, and deep gratitude for your modern life during the viewing process. Now, take a deep breath, but not too deep. After all, we are simulating the air of the Middle Ages, and the story officially begins. In the spring of 1533, Pope Clement VII personal doctor discovered a shocking secret during his annual physical examination. The earwax in the Pope's left ear was in the shape of a perfect cross. The news spread like wildfire throughout the Roman Curia, and soon triggered the most absurd Holy Earwax battle in European history. To say how crazy the medieval church was about holy objects, even the most insignificant secrets of the human body could be placed on the altar, which makes modern people's madness for celebrity peripheral products seem restrained. Let's hold our breath and walk into a cardinal's ear canal cleaning ceremony in 1540. The scene here is more magical than an alchemy laboratory. Senior clergymen follow the Angel Trilogy to collect earwax. First, use a silver-plated ear spoon for sacred collection, then use a gem-encrusted magnifying glass to identify the shape, and finally use parchment sprinkled with incense ash to preserve it forever. A secret letter from a Venetian ambassador recorded that King Francis I of France once spent 300 gold coins to buy a saint's earwax fossil, but it turned out to be a piece of air-dried cheese. This is not personal hygiene, but a religious financial derivatives trading scene. The most ironic thing about this earwax worship is that the more disgusting the secretion, the more sacred it is. The Spanish Inquisition explicitly stipulated that the earwax of heretic inquisitors had exorcism effect, resulting in many prisoners being forced to eat the earwax of the interrogator alive. Henry VIII of England was even more outrageous. He required that the royal earwax collector must be a virgin, saying that it was to maintain the purity of the secretion. The most exaggerated one is a German elector who specially built the earwax pantheon and collected earwax samples from various nobles in crystal bottles. This operation makes modern gene banks seem lacking in imagination. So the question is, when the powerful regard earwax as a sacred object, how do ordinary people deal with earwax? Time came to the slums of Paris in 1555. The ear canal cleaning here depends entirely on God's help, Blacksmiths rely on the vibration of iron to naturally drop debris. Fishermen let the sound of waves wash the ear canal, and beggars invented the mutual ear digging method. You help me dig my left ear, and I help you dig your right ear. A court record shows that a barber was convicted of stealing human holy oil for hiding customers' earwax to make love potions. This is probably the earliest case of biological material infringement. Even worse are the apprentice monks in the monastery. They were asked to seal the devil with earwax, and as a result, many people have mastered the skill of pinching miniature demon statues with earwax, which can be called the most disgusting sculptors in history. When it comes to the social changes caused by earwax, we have to mention the most absurd hearing purity tax in the Middle Ages. In 1433, Florence promulgated the Ear Canal Hygiene Decree, which stipulated that ears could not be picked at will within a half-mile radius of the church. Violators had to pay an air purification fee, which gave rise to professional holy ear pickers who provided door-to-door services to nobles with ivory tweezers. A French earl was even more outrageous. He claimed that earwax in the territory contains gold, and forced farmers to hand in earwax every month. The most exaggerated was the earwax futures, invented by Venetian merchants, which securitized the expected earwax production of cardinals in the next 10 years. This financial innovation made the subprime mortgage crisis seem simple and unpretentious. While Europeans were arguing over earwax standards, the emergence of science made things even more magical. Some medical schools began to teach earwax physiognomy, claiming that the shape of earwax could predict the direction of the plague. German doctors invented the earwax distiller, claiming that it could extract the essence of life, but even laboratory mice refused to touch the boiled stuff. The most amazing thing is the holy ear cleaning ceremony of a certain pope, which requires 7 cardinals to take turns to collect with a golden ear spoon and then use the Holy Grail to receive it, saying that it is to listen to the whispers of God, which makes modern hearing aid advertisements pale in comparison. Let us see the craziest earwax black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1477, Milan became popular with mummy ear powder to treat deafness, causing the salon of the upper class to become an archaeological site. French doctors invented the earwax amplifier, which is to apply the collected earwax to the inner wall of the horn, claiming that it can enhance hearing, but it caused a large number of bacterial infections. A British noble designed a talking earwax collection cabinet that automatically plays Bible passages every time it is opened. These inventions prove that human beings' imagination in the use of earwax is always 8 centuries ahead of medical common sense. The terminator of this earwax craze is ridiculous. It was printing. When the Bible began to be printed on a large scale, people suddenly found that reading God's words was much more convenient than licking the bishop's earwax. In 1562, a leaflet of a Geneva reformer wrote, "If earwax can convey oracles, then donkeys should have become prophets long ago." What's more ironic is that when the church was obsessed with earwax theology, real medical discoveries were being suppressed as heresy. Just like modern people buying AirPods while believing in quantum ear candle therapy, human auditory superstition is always self-contradictory. When we see those gem-studded ear spoons in the museum, don't forget the real history behind them. They are the auditory channels of power games, the physiological proof of class oppression, and the wax crystallization of human superstition. Today's ASMR ear cleaning videos of internet celebrities and the holy ear cleaning rituals of medieval nobles are essentially sensory marketing, except that we have replaced the gold-plated ear spoon with 3D stereo. Next time you clean your ear canal, remember, 500 years ago, your ancestors might have been ecstatic to get a grain of earwax from the Lord, because the auditory secretions at that time could prove your closeness to power better than today's cryptocurrency. Just as European dignitaries were arguing over the sanctity of earwax, another more secretive body function was being given political significance: medieval nail politics. Imagine that a certain archduke who had just completed holy ear cleaning was now asking a manicurist to trim the half-moon mark on his little finger with an ivory knife, and the heralds were arguing about what kind of heraldic pattern should be used to represent this white edge. This led to a more striking body politics than earwax. In an era where even the angle of nail trimming had to reflect the feudal hierarchy, the cuticle could scrape out the edge of power. In 1565, an unprecedented diplomatic storm broke out in the court of King Philip II of Spain. the French ambassador trimmed his nails at an angle 3 degrees higher than the prescribed angle. This detail, which seems insignificant today, led to the suspension of diplomatic relations between the two countries for 6 months, because according to the Castilian nail etiquette code, the inclination of nails directly reflects loyalty to the monarchy. Medieval nobles had long developed the cuticle into a political statement. A perfect nail arc can make you rise to prominence, while an improper barb may ruin the entire family's future. To say what is the real details determine success or failure, the workplace dress requirements in modern society are as naive as child's play in front of medieval nail politics. Let's squint and observe the nail care ritual of the Doge of Venice in 1580. The level of sophistication here is comparable to modern microcarving art. The nail care of top nobles should follow the pentagram system. First soak in holy water to soften the cuticle, then adjust the arc with a diamond-studded ivory file, then polish the surface with velvet, and finally use a magnifying glass to check the symmetry of the half-moon mark. According to a secret report from a Florentine spy, Pope Gregory XIII once mobilized the entire Vatican to look for God's revelation because of a white spot on the nail of his left ring finger. It turned out that the nail artist had spilled the powder of the holy wafer. This is not personal hygiene, but political prophecy plus performance art. The most absurd thing about this nail worship is that the more impractical the requirement, the more authoritative it is. The Valois dynasty of France stipulated that the nails of nobles must be left to the extent that they can curl, which led many people to invent nail extension sleeves, false nails made of whalebone. Elizabeth I of England was even more outrageous. She required that the nails of courtiers must be painted pearl white, which was exclusive to the royal family. Those who violated the requirement would be punished as usurpation, which gave birth to the earliest nail black market in history. The most exaggerated one was a certain elector of the Holy Roman Empire. He set up a royal nail archives and used gold foil to print the nail patterns of each noble. This operation makes modern fingerprint recognition technology seem lacking in ritual. So the question is, when the powerful regard nails as a totem of power, how do ordinary people deal with their cuticles? In 1590, in the streets of London, nails were as practical as farm tools. Butchers used nails as meat hooks, tailors used nails to remove thread ends, and beggars even invented nail currency, using nail clippings as a medium for small transactions. A public security record shows that a baker was convicted of stealing trade secrets because he hid baking powder in his nails. This is probably the earliest case of biotechnology infringement. Even worse are the ascetics in the monastery. They were required to carve confessions with nails, and as a result, many of them have mastered the skill of carving the entire psalms on their fingernails, which can be called the smallest copyists in history. Speaking of social unrest caused by nails, we have to mention the most bizarre keratin tax in the Middle Ages. In 1455, the Duchy of Burgundy promulgated the nail length decree, stipulating that civilians' nails should not exceed the width of wheat grains, which gave rise to professional nail measurement officers, carrying magnifying glasses for surprise inspections everywhere. A French earl was even more outrageous. He claimed that the nail clippings in the territory contain gold or components, and forced serfs to hand in nail clippings every month. The most exaggerated is the nail futures invented by Florentine merchants, which securitized the expected nail growth of noble ladies in the next 10 years. This financial innovation makes modern derivatives trading seem conservative. When Europeans argued endlessly about nail standards, the intervention of medicine made things even more magical. Some medical schools opened nail physiognomy and claimed that the outcome of wars could be predicted by the lines on the nails. German doctors invented the nail distiller, saying that it could extract the essence of life. But the thing boiled was so good that even laboratory cockroaches refused to touch it. The most outrageous is the holy nail clipping ceremony of a certain pope, which requires 7 cardinals to take turns to cut a knife with golden scissors, and then use the Holy Grail to receive the clippings, saying that it is to collect angels' tears. This operation makes modern nail salons feel ashamed. Let us see the craziest nail black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1488, it became popular in Milan to use mummy nail powder to treat onychomycosis. which turned the aristocratic salon into an archaeological site. French doctors invented the nail growth device, which was based on wrapping the finger with a fish bladder bandage, resulting in a large number of knuckle necrosis. A British noble designed a singing nail file, which played hymns every time it was used. These inventions prove that human imagination in nail decoration is always 9 centuries ahead of practical medicine. Ironically, the terminator of this nail craze was the popularization of muskets. When the length of nails on the battlefield seriously affected the loading speed, the nobles finally had to bow to practicality. In 1601, a Spanish general wrote in his memoirs, "In front of pulling the trigger, no matter how elegant the nail arc is, it is a burden." What's even more ridiculous is that when the dignitaries are obsessed with nail politics, the real military revolution is being dragged down by these cumbersome cuticles. Just like modern people complaining about the insensitivity of mobile phone touchscreens while doing manicures, human formalism is always self-contradictory. When we see those gem-encrusted nail clippers in museums, don't forget the real history behind them, the keratin proof of power games, the physical imprint of class oppression, and the hardened crystallization of human vanity. Today's crystal nail art of internet celebrities and the political nails of medieval nobles are essentially identity performances, except that we have replaced the gold-plated files with UV light therapy lamps. Next time you trim your nails, remember, for 100 years ago, your ancestors might have been excited to get a piece of the Lord's nail clippings, because the cuticle at that time could prove your distance from power better than today's business cards. Just as European dignitaries were arguing over the curvature of their nails, another more secretive physical feature was becoming an identity code medieval toe heraldry. Imagine a marquis who has just finished holy nail clipping and is now asking a tattoo artist to draw a miniature family crest on the second toe of his left foot, while the elders of the Heraldry Institute are fighting over what red to use for this pattern. This leads to a body politics that is more secretive than fingers. An era in which even the dirt between toes must reflect the family's glory, and the dermis under the stratum corneum can ooze the juice of power. In 1612, an incredible heraldry debate broke out in the court of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II. The cause was that the family crest of the Archduke of Bohemia on the third toe of his right foot was found to have an extra gold leaf than the emperor's. This dispute, known as the Toe War, ended with both sides tattooing larger-scale crests on their buttocks, marking that the medieval nobles pushed body marking to a ridiculous height. As for what is the real identity symbol, the signature badges of modern society are as childish as children's graffiti in front of medieval toe heraldry. Let's hold our breath and watch the foot coat of arms painting ceremony of Marie de Medici, the Queen Mother of France in 1620. The level of detail here is comparable to modern chip etching technology. The toe coat of arms of top nobles must follow the Trinity standard. First soak in wine to soften the cuticle, then use a brush made of spider legs to outline the outline, and finally use toad venom mixed with gold powder to fix the color. According to a secret letter from a Venetian ambassador, King Philip III of Spain once declared a 3-day mourning period for the country because the coat of arms on the little toe of his left foot faded. It turned out that the Queen rubbed her feet twice more when washing her feet. This is not personal hygiene, but a moving territorial declaration plus performance art. The most ironic thing about this toe worship is that the less conspicuous the position, the more noble it is. James I of England promulgated the Foot Coat of Arms Act, stipulating that nobles must tattoo their family coat of arms on the soles of their feet, causing the upper-class dance to become a collective handstand exhibition. Russian Tsar Mikhail I was even more outrageous. He required courtiers to make rubbings of their feet and submit them to the court, which gave rise to professional foot printmakers, unlucky people who worked on the soles of nobles with magnifying glasses. The most exaggerated one was a certain Grand Duke of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, who built a pantheon of toe heraldry and cast models of all his vassals' toes with pure silver. This operation makes modern 3D printing technology seem lacking in aristocratic temperament. So the question is, when the powerful use toes as heraldry display boards, how do ordinary people deal with their feet? Time came to the slums of Amsterdam in 1630. The feet here are as practical as multifunctional tools. Fishermen use toes to clamp fishing lines, tailors use soles to press cloth, and beggars even invented footprint fortune-telling. to predict the fortune by observing the calluses of customers' feet. A public security file records that a shoemaker was convicted of stealing biological heraldry for secretly rubbing the foot shape of an aristocratic customer. This is probably the earliest case of human body mapping infringement. Even worse were the ascetics in the monasteries, who were required to copy the Bible with their toes. As a result, many of them mastered the skill of using their big toes to hold pens and write cursive characters, making them the most foot-consuming copyists in history. Speaking of social changes caused by toes, we have to mention the most absurd foot tax in the Middle Ages. In 1577, Venice promulgated the Toe Heraldry registration law, which stipulated that every citizen must file the second toe pattern of the right foot with the city hall, giving rise to professional toe painters, artists who walked the streets with microscopes. A certain pasha in the Ottoman Empire was even more outrageous. He claimed that the footprints given by Allah are the basis for taxation and divided tax brackets according to the degree of toe curvature. The most exaggerated is the footprint bond, invented by Florentine bankers, which packaged the future foot shape changes of aristocratic children into financial products. This innovation makes the modern futures market look conservative. When Europeans were arguing over toe standards, the involvement of science made things even more magical. Some universities offered foot physiognomy, claiming that the distance between toes could predict the outcome of a war. A German alchemist invented a footprint extractor, claiming that it could distill blood essence, but the liquid boiled out even made flies in the laboratory fly around. The most amazing thing is the holy foot washing ceremony of a certain pope, which required 7 cardinals to kiss the toe emblems of each noble in turn, saying that they wanted to reinforce faith with saliva, which makes modern nail salons feel inferior. Let us see the craziest toe black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1599, Paris became popular with saint's foot skin powder to treat corns, causing the dressing room of the upper class to become a religious artifact exhibition. British doctors invented the toe extender, which works by stretching the joints with pliers, resulting in a large number of toe fractures. A Russian noble designed a singing foot bell. Each bell corresponds to a different toe and can play hymns when walking. These inventions prove that human imagination in foot decoration is always ahead of practical medicine for 10 centuries. The terminator of this toe craze is ridiculous, the popularization of socks. When the textile industry finally produced sufficiently exquisite socks, the nobles suddenly found that no one appreciated the most expensive toe art. In 1640, a Dutch merchant wrote in his diary, "The foot emblem with 100 gold coins is not as eye-catching as the lace stockings bought with 1 gold coin." What's more ironic is that when the powerful are obsessed with toe politics, the real military revolution is being dragged down by these inconvenient artistic feet. Just like modern people complaining about the insensitive touchscreen of their mobile phones while doing manicures, human formalism is always self-contradictory. When we see those gemstone-studded toe rings in museums, don't forget the real history behind them: the subcutaneous penetration of power games, the physical engraving of class oppression, and the keratin crystallization of human vanity. Today's anklet fashion of internet celebrities and the heraldic toes of medieval nobles are essentially status performances, except that we have replaced gold powder tattoos with titanium steel jewelry. Next time you trim your toenails, remember, 300 years ago, your ancestors might have been excited to get a piece of foot dandruff from the Lord, because the stratum corneum at that time could prove the purity of your bloodline better than today's DNA testing. While European dignitaries were arguing over toe heraldry, another more private physiological phenomenon was being given political significance: the medieval theology of the belly button. Imagine that a certain archduke who had just completed the holy footprint was now asking the royal doctor to measure the depth of his belly button. While theologians were arguing whether this depression was enough to carry the mystery of the Trinity, this led to a body politics that was more secretive than the surface markings. An era in which even abdominal folds were subject to theological interpretation, and umbilical cord residues could ferment into holy objects. In 1653, Pope Innocent X secretly convened an unprecedented theological debate in the Vatican to discuss whether the umbilical cord not extracted from the remains of a saint had the divinity of the secondary Trinity. This holy umbilical conference lasted for 7 months and ended with the birth of a special crystal umbilical display cabinet. marking that the medieval church developed a new theological value for the most secret depression of the human body. To say, what is the real body sanctuary? The religious relics in modern society are as superficial as tourist souvenirs in front of the medieval naval theology. Let's open the gilded pajamas of Louis XIV, the Sun King of France in 1660. The naval care ceremony here is more grand than the daily government affairs of the Palace of Versailles. The naval care of royal family members must follow the Holy Trinity procedure. First, clean the groove with angel tears distilled water, then use a velvet brush dipped in gold powder to draw the outline, and finally use a special glass hemisphere for sealing and protection. According to a secret letter from an Austrian ambassador, King Carlos II of Spain once executed 3 royal doctors because his navel was half a millimeter short. It turned out that the gold wire used for measurement was secretly shortened by the Queen. This is not a body depression, but a moving holy grail plus political bargaining chips. The most absurd thing about this naval worship is that the more useless the body feature is, the more sacred it is. Russian Tsar Alexei issued the navel-shaped decree, stipulating that nobles must expose their navels to meet the emperor, causing the Kremlin's winter court meetings to become a hotbed for collective colds. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire was even more outrageous. He required that the navels of the concubines in the harem must be filled with pearls, which gave birth to professional naval expanders, tough guys who used ivory expanders to forcibly expand the depression. The most exaggerated is the naval temple, built by a Polish Grand Duke, who cast naval models of all vassals in pure gold. This operation makes modern human body museums seem to lack the depth of faith. So the question is, when the rich and powerful worshipped their navels as holy objects, how did the common people deal with their navels? In the slums of London in 1670, the navels here were as practical as multifunctional pockets. Vendors used them to hide coins, prostitutes used them to hold perfume, and thieves even invented the umbilical cord clamping technique to smuggle 3 walnuts without being discovered. A court record shows that a midwife was convicted of stealing the source of life for collecting umbilical cords from praetorians to make love potions. This is probably the earliest case of biological tissue theft. Even worse are the ascetics in the monastery. They were required to use their navels to collect holy dew, and as a result, many of them developed the skill of lying on their backs for 12 hours, which can be called the most pious human container in history. Speaking of the social unrest caused by the navel, we have to mention the most absurd umbilical tax in the Middle Ages. In 1588, Venice promulgated the navel display law, which stipulated that prostitutes must paint their navels red, giving rise to professional navel painters, artists who work on embarrassing parts with magnifying glasses. A German elector was even more outrageous. He claimed that the depth of the navel reflects loyalty and divided the ranks of nobility according to the degree of depression. The most exaggerated is the naval futures invented by Florentine merchants, which securitized the future naval development of aristocratic newborns. This financial innovation makes modern insurance actuaries look conservative. When Europeans argued endlessly about naval standards, the involvement of medicine made things even more magical. Some medical schools opened naval physiognomy, claiming that the shape of the navel could predict the trend of plague. German doctors invented the navel distiller, saying that it could extract life essence. But the boiled stuff was so good that even laboratory mice refused to touch it. The most outrageous is the holy navel treatment of a certain pope, which requires 7 cardinals to take turns to stimulate the patient's navel with gold needles, saying that it is to activate the energy nodes left by angels. This operation makes modern acupuncture clinics feel ashamed. Let's see the craziest naval black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1605, Paris became popular with mummy navel powder to fill the depression, causing the dressing room of the upper class to become an archaeological site. British doctors invented the navel expander, which is to force it to expand with a screw device, resulting in a large number of peritonitis. A Russian noble designed a singing navel ring with a built-in miniature organ device that can play hymns when breathing. These inventions prove that human imagination in naval decoration is always ahead of practical medicine for 11 centuries. The terminator of this naval craze is ironic, the popularity of corsets. When aristocratic women began to pursue a slim waist, They suddenly found that the most sacred navel was tightened so that it could not be seen at all. In 1680, a French fashion magazine wrote, "The sanctuary hidden under the whalebone is like a theater without an audience." What's even more ridiculous is that when the powerful are obsessed with naval theology, the real anatomical discoveries are being regarded as blasphemy. Just like modern people who do liposuction and navel rings at the same time, human body worship is always self-contradictory. When we see those gem-studded navel displays in museums, don't forget the real history behind them, the physical imprint of power games, the skin folds of class oppression, and the concave reflection of human superstition. Today's navel ring fashion of internet celebrities and the sacred navel pit of medieval nobles are essentially identity labels, except that we have replaced gold powder and holy oil with titanium steel jewelry. Next time you clean your navel, remember, 350 years ago, your ancestors might have been ecstatic to get a grain of navel dirt from the Lord, because the body secretions at that time could prove the purity of your bloodline better than today's genetic testing. While European dignitaries were arguing over the depth of their navels, another more hidden physiological feature was being given political significance: the medieval knee politics. Imagine an elector who has just completed the holy navel treatment and is now kneeling on a cushion embroidered with family crests, while the ceremonial officers are measuring the precise angle of his knee bend. This leads to a more conspicuous performance of power than the indentation of the body. In an era when even kneeling postures are divided into different levels, the patella can even wear the lines of the feudal order. In 1685, an incredible etiquette crisis broke out in the palace of Versailles of King Louis XIV of France. The angle of the right knee of Prince Condé was 3 degrees less than the prescribed angle when he met the emperor. This difference, which seems insignificant to modern people, led to the prince being punished to kneel 30 times in public in the Hall of Mirrors, because according to the Versailles knee etiquette code, the angle of the patella directly reflects the degree of obedience to the royal power. The medieval nobles had long developed the human joints into a political barometer. A perfect kneeling posture can make you soar, while a callus on the knee may expose your shameful origin. To say, what is the real groveling? The workplace etiquette of modern society is like a kindergarten kid's play in front of the medieval knee politics. Let's lower our eyes and observe the audience ceremony of Leopold I, the Holy Roman Emperor in 1690. Every knee here is more concerned than the face of the courtier. The kneeling posture of top nobles must meet the golden triangle standard. The thigh is 41.8 degrees to the ground, symbolizing the sacred proportion. The calf and the instep are at right angles, representing stability and loyalty, and the knee and the mat are 3 fingers apart, representing elegance and humility. According to a secret report from a Venetian ambassador, King Carlos II of Spain once executed 2 attendants who laid the carpet on the spot because the carpet was too thick and deformed his kneeling posture. This is not daily etiquette, but clearly a practice of human geometry plus power performance art. The most ironic thing about this knee worship is that the more uncomfortable the posture, the more loyal it is. Before the reform of Peter the Great of Russia, the noble court stipulated that the complainant must kneel on a special iron sand mat, which was called honing loyalty. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire was even more outrageous. He required foreign envoys to crush walnuts with their knees when kneeling, which gave birth to professional, walnut-quality inspectors. The most exaggerated one is a certain Grand Duke of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, who built a knee-shaped archive and used plaster to print the kneeling depressions of all his vassals. This operation makes modern 3D scanning technology seem to lack political connotations. So the question is, when the powerful use their knees as political tools, how do ordinary people deal with daily kneeling? Time came to the market square in Paris in 1700. The knees here are as practical as farm tools bakers kneel to knead dough, blacksmiths kneel to forge iron, and beggars even invented the kneeling begging method to use the thickness of knee calluses to prove the degree of suffering. A public security file records that a grocer was convicted of fraudulent piety because he secretly padded knee pads in his pants. This is probably the earliest case of body fraud. Even worse are the novice monks in the monastery. They were asked to measure the road to atonement with their knees. As a result, many people have mastered the skill of climbing stairs on their knees, which can be called the most flexible confessors in history. When it comes to social changes caused by knees, we have to mention the most absurd kneeling tax in the Middle Ages. In 1623, Britain promulgated the Knee Wear Act, which stipulated that taxes would be levied according to the thickness of knee calluses of various classes, giving rise to professional knee measurement officers, civil servants squatting at the door of the church with calipers. The Tokugawa shogunate in Japan was even more outrageous. It required common people to kneel and make a loud dong sound when they saw samurai. Otherwise, they would be punished for disrespect. The most exaggerated was the kneeling futures invented by the King of Siam, which securitized the expected number of kneeling times of his subjects in the next 10 years. This financial innovation makes modern carbon emission trading look conservative. When Europeans were arguing over knee standards, the intervention of medicine made things even more magical. Some medical schools opened knee physiognomy, claiming that the shape of the knees could predict the probability of rebellion of subjects. German doctors invented the kneeling corrector, which was based on the principle of fixing the joint angle with a barbed iron ring, resulting in a large number of suppurative arthritis. The most amazing thing is the holy kneeling ceremony of a certain pope, which requires 7 cardinals to measure the angle of the believer's knees with a golden ruler at the same time, saying that it is to calibrate the love for God. This operation makes modern rehabilitation therapy devices feel inferior. Let us see the craziest knee black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1645, the Palace of Versailles became popular with saints' knee bone powder to treat arthritis, causing the dressing room of the upper class to become a religious artifact exhibition. French doctors invented the kneeling recorder and used a gear device to record the number of kneeling times per day, which often got stuck in the silk trouser legs of the nobles. A Persian noble designed a praying mechanical knee with a built-in clockwork device that can automatically complete the kneeling action. These inventions prove that human beings' imagination in the use of knees is always ahead of practical medicine for 12 centuries. The terminator of this knee revolution is ridiculous. It is the popularization of chairs. When Louis XIV began to allow his favorites to sit when he met the king, the nobles suddenly found that the most exquisite kneeling art had lost its place. In 1715, a duchess wrote in a letter, "My knee calluses are worth less than my jewelry." What's more ironic is that while the powerful are obsessed with knee politics, the real military revolution is being dragged down by these rigid joints. Just like modern people complaining about the harm of sitting for a long time while browsing their phones for 8 hours a day, human ritual sense is always self-contradictory. When we see those gem-studded kneeling pads in museums, don't forget the real history behind them, the physical imprint of power games, the bone imprint of class oppression, and the skin memory of human obedience. Today's groveling in the workplace and the ritual kneeling of medieval nobles are essentially power performances, except that we have replaced the velvet cushions with smiley emojis. Next time you kneel down on one knee to propose, remember, 300 years ago, your ancestors might have felt honored to be able to kneel within the Lord's sight, because the position of the knees at that time could better mark your social coordinates than today's GPS positioning. While European dignitaries were arguing over the angle of their knees, another more secret body function was also incorporated into the etiquette system, the etiquette of sneezing in the Middle Ages. Imagine that a certain earl who had just completed holy excretion was now covering his nose with a handkerchief embroidered with gold thread, while his servants were arguing over who was qualified to catch the droplets of his master's sneeze. This led to a more subtle body politics than excretion, an era in which even burping had to pay attention to intonation, and farting could have the rhythm of a sonnet. In the spring of 1479, an unprecedented diplomatic crisis broke out in the Doge's palace in Venice. The French ambassador sneezed at an inopportune time during an audience. This physiological reaction, which seems insignificant today, made the 30 nobles present collectively draw their swords, because according to the Mediterranean sneeze etiquette code, sneezing at the Lord is equivalent to launching a coup with the lungs. The medieval nobles had long developed their body functions into political tools. A perfect sneeze could allow you to enter the upper class, while an uncontrolled burp could ruin the reputation of the entire family. To talk about what is the real body politics, the workplace etiquette of modern society is like kindergarten in front of medieval sneezing. Let us hold our breath and walk into the banquet hall of the Duke of Burgundy in 1483. The air here is floating with something more subtle than the aroma of food, the precise control of the timing of sneezing. Top nobles must follow the 3-act play rule when sneezing. First touch the tip of the nose with a gemstone sneeze stick, then complete the sneeze with a Pavarotti-style trill, and finally use a silk handkerchief embroidered with the family crest to complete an elegant 45-degree wipe. According to the manuscript of an Italian etiquette expert, King Charles VIII of France was suspected of being cursed because of the wrong rhythm of his sneeze, which resulted in the burning of 3 astrologers. This is not a physiological reaction, but a vocal test plus political censorship. The most absurd thing about this sneezing etiquette is that the more anti-human the requirement, the more noble it is. An elector of the Holy Roman Empire stipulated that if you sneeze in front of him, you must shout "God bless" in Latin, which resulted in many illiterate nobles suffering from sneezopophobia. The British royal family is even more outrageous, requiring sneezes to be synchronized with the time of the clock, so the servants invented the sneeze reminder bell. Sniff pepper as soon as they hear the bell to prepare. The most exaggerated one was a duchess in Spain who asked her maids to catch her sneeze droplets on a silver plate, saying that she wanted to prevent soul fragments from leaking out. This operation makes modern germ theory seem lacking in imagination. So the question is, when the nobles turned sneezes into operas, how did the common people deal with itchy noses? Time came to the market in Florence in 1492, where sneezes were as free as wild dogs peeing. Ordinary citizens sneezed according to their moods. Peasant women could make harvest sneezes that shook off the dust on the roof, and blacksmiths invented forging sneezes with sparks. A court record shows that a baker was convicted of air attack because he blew away the noble's wig when he sneezed. This is probably the earliest air crime case. Even worse are the monks in the monastery. They were asked to turn sneezes into prayers. As a result, many people have mastered the unique skill of reading the Bible while sneezing, which sounds like a phonograph possessed by the devil. When it comes to social unrest caused by sneezes, we have to mention the most magical toilet paper rebellion in the Middle Ages. In 1385, a town in England promulgated the Sneezing Cloth Ordinance, stipulating that civilians could only blow their noses with burlap, which led to a collective riot by linen merchants. A French count was even more outrageous. He declared that sneezes are the private property of the air in the territory and would charge air usage fees to every traveler who sneezed. The most exaggerated is the sneeze voting law of the Venice Senate, the direction in which the members' sneeze represents approval or opposition. As a result, there was a collective cold during a vote, and whether the bill was passed or not depended on the wind direction at the time. This kind of political operation makes modern electronic voting seem too simple. When Europeans went crazy about the etiquette of sneezing, the intervention of the church made things even more incredible. Some monasteries required monks to make the sign of the cross when they sneezed, but many people smeared their faces with snot. There was also a bishop who invented the exorcism sneeze method, sneezing at the patient to drive away the disease, successfully turning ordinary influenza into a group infection. The most amazing thing is the holy sneeze ceremony of a certain pope, which requires 7 cardinals to shout "God bless" at the same time, saying that it is to reinforce faith with sound waves. This mix of religion and sneezing is comparable to modern people sneezing at a computer screen and saying, "God bless me, no blue screen." Let's see the craziest sneeze black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1460, it was popular in Paris to use Egyptian mummy nose powder to prevent sneezing, causing many people's nostrils to become archaeological sites. German doctors invented the sneeze suppression helmet, which works by tightening the chin with a belt, resulting in a large number of mandibular dislocations. A British noble designed a musical sneeze mask, which triggers an organ device when sneezing, turning the physiological reaction into a small concert. These inventions prove that human beings' stupid creativity in controlling sneezes is always 5 centuries ahead of medical common sense. Ironically, the terminator of this sneeze revolution was a perfume merchant. As the Black Death spread, people suddenly discovered that sneezing into a sachet could produce a fragrant smell of death. The account book of a Florentine merchant in 1498 showed that he bought the entire street by selling anti-plague sneeze perfume, What's even more ridiculous is that when the nobles were obsessed with sneezing etiquette, the real plague was spreading everywhere with their droplets. Just like modern people wearing masks and farting in elevators, human hygiene performances are always full of contradictions. When we see those gem-encrusted sneeze sticks in museums, don't forget the real meaning behind them: the breathing performance of class solidification, the muscle memory of power games, and the bacterial culture dishes of human vanity. Today's personality collapse of celebrities and the sneezing misconduct of medieval nobles are essentially image disasters, except that we have replaced the silk handkerchief with a public relations statement. The next time you sneeze and subconsciously say sorry, remember, 600 years ago, your ancestors might have been practicing hard to imitate the sneezing rhythm of the Lord, because the respiratory reaction at that time could better demonstrate your social status than today's social media. While European nobles were arguing over the etiquette of sneezing, another more secret body function was undergoing a ritual transformation: the acoustics of burping in the Middle Ages. Imagine that a marquis who had just completed a holy sneeze was now analyzing his post-dinner burps with a burp odor detector made of pure silver, while his sommelier was recording the pitch of each bubble. This led to a body politics that was more complex than sneezing, an era in which digestive tract gas was also incorporated into the symphony of etiquette, and even farts had to pay attention to the rhythm of the tones. In 1491, an unprecedented musical debate broke out in the court of Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor. The cause was that the French ambassador burped in B-flat after the banquet, while the German nobles insisted that the royal standard burp should be in C major. This digestive tract pitch dispute that lasted for 3 months ended with both sides publishing the Royal Burp Pitch Guide, marking that the medieval nobles had developed their bodily functions to an outrageous artistic height. To talk about what is the real aristocratic cultivation, the table manners of modern society are just like kindergarten children playing house in front of medieval burping. Let's hold our stomachs and walk into the banquet hall of the Duke of Burgundy in 1487. The after-meal time here is comparable to the entrance examination of the music school. Top nobles must master the 5th degree cycle burping method. First use champagne to activate the bubbles in the stomach, then release the gas in the form of vibrato, and finally finish with a silencer handkerchief embroidered with the family emblem. According to the notes of an Italian etiquette master, the Duke of Milan was suspected of being possessed by the devil because he burped 3 times in a row at the same pitch, which resulted in the entire exorcist team suffering from indigestion. This is not a physiological phenomenon, but an opera excerpt plus a spiritual ritual. The most ironic thing about this burping etiquette is that the more inhumane the standard, the more noble it is. The court of Henry VII of England stipulated that burping must be in harmony with the organ, which led to the servants inventing the burp trigger, installing a pepper spray device under the keys. The Valois dynasty in France was even more extreme, requiring that the burps of noble ladies must be accompanied by the scent of roses. So chefs developed the floral gastric filling technique to inject rose essential oil into food. The most exaggerated one was a Spanish archduke who specially hired a burp recorder to record the digestive sound effects after each meal with music scores, saying that he wanted to establish a family sound archive. This operation makes modern recording technology seem lacking in ritual. So the question is, when the nobles turned burps into symphonies, how did ordinary people deal with bloating? Time came to the brewery in Nuremberg in 1495, where burps were as free as church bells. Farmers could burp harvest burps that shook off the dust in the barn, and brewers invented liquid notes with the aroma of malt. A municipal record shows that a baker was sentenced to openly extinguishing the municipal light because he blew out the mayor's candle with a burp. This is probably the earliest case of gas attack on police officers. Even worse are the novice monks in the monastery. They were asked to turn burps into hymns, and as a result, many of them have mastered the skill of singing psalms while burping, which sounds like a drunken organ. Speaking of social changes caused by burping, we have to mention the most ridiculous gas tax in the Middle Ages. In 1397, Venice promulgated the Burp Management Ordinance, which stipulated that burping within a 1-mile radius of the Doge's palace required an air vibration fee, which gave rise to professional burpers. They were paid to burp for the nobles to meet the standards. A French earl was even more outrageous. He claimed that the gas in the territory belongs to feudal property, and that taxes should be collected according to the number of burps. The most exaggerated is the burp futures market in Florence, where bankers packaged the expected burps of nobles after meals into financial products for trading. This economic innovation makes modern virtual currencies seem down to earth. When Europeans were arguing over the standard of burps, the intervention of the church made things even more magical. Some monasteries required monks to make the sign of the cross when burping, and as a result, many people regarded stomach acid regurgitation as a sacrament. There were also bishops who invented the exorcism burp method, burping at the possessed to dispel evil spirits, successfully turning the exorcism ceremony into a collective stomach disease transmission scene. The most outrageous is the holy burp ceremony of a certain pope, which requires 3 cardinals to burp at the same time to form a harmony, saying that it is to purify heresy with sound waves. This mix of theology and digestion is comparable to modern people using electronic Buddhist chanting machines to transcend takeout. Let us see the craziest burp black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1473, it became popular in Milan to use angel horns to transform human airflow, causing many nobles' esophagus to become a musical instrument repair shop. German doctors invented the belch filter, which was based on plugging the esophagus with wool, resulting in large-scale gastric perforation. A British noble designed a music digestion bag, in which the gas after a meal would be turned into an improvisation through a reed device. These inventions prove that human stupid creativity in controlling digestive gas is always 6 centuries ahead of medical common sense. The terminator of this belch revolution is ridiculous perfume manufacturers. As the nobles' pursuit of fragrant belches intensified, perfumers began to add excessive spices to food. The account book of a Venetian merchant in 1499 showed that he bought 2 merchant ships by selling sacred stomach sack freshener. What's more ironic is that when the nobles were obsessed with the art of belching, real indigestion was spreading throughout Europe with their 5th-degree cycle belch method. Just like modern people taking stomach medicine while live-streaming their human eating performances are always self-contradictory. When we see those gem-studded silencers in museums, don't forget the real history behind them, the audio evidence of class solidification, the abdominal resonance of power games, and the gastric acid crystallization of human vanity. Today's eating broadcast ASMR by internet celebrities and the belch concert of medieval nobles are essentially performative eating, except that we have replaced the embroidered handkerchiefs with noise-canceling microphones. The next time you can't help burping after a meal, remember, 600 years ago, your ancestors might have been training their abdominal muscles to burp in a way that met the Lord's musical standards, because the pitch of the digestive tract at that time could determine your social scale more than the current karaoke score. Just as European nobles were arguing over the rhythm of burps, another more subtle body emission was becoming a symbol of status: medieval body odor aromatology. Imagine a countess who has just completed a holy burp and is now having her maid use a gilded scent fan to assess the aristocratic scent of her armpits, while perfumers are fighting over who has the right to copy this royal sweat fragrance. This brings up a body politics that is more secretive than the music of the digestive tract. A Middle Ages that turned natural body odor into a perfume of power, and even body odor could be divided into top, middle, and base notes. In 1503, an unprecedented spice war broke out in the court of King Louis XII of France. The cause was that 2 duchesses threw silk handkerchiefs soaked with underarm secretions at each other in a royal meeting in order to compete for the title of Royal Chief Body Odor Perfumer. This smell duel, that lasted for 6 months, ended with the Pope's envoy being knocked unconscious and leaving the scene, marking that the medieval aristocracy had developed body odor to a suffocating artistic height. To talk about what is the real aristocratic smell, modern perfume advertisements are as thin as air fresheners in front of the medieval body odor politics. Let's pinch our noses and walk into the morning dressing room of the Doge of Venice in 1510. The air composition here is more complex than that of an alchemy laboratory. The body odor conditioning of top aristocrats should follow the triple rule. First, cultivate the base smell with rotten meat, then cover the middle note with myrrh and cinnamon, and finally touch the fingertips with rose water. According to a secret letter from a Spanish ambassador, Henry VIII of England hired an astrologer to mix a constellation perfume because his mistress's body odor was not mellow enough. which resulted in the collective hair loss of civets in the Tower of London Zoo. This is not personal hygiene, but the development of biological weapons plus a spiritual ritual. The most ironic thing about this body odor worship is that the more anti-human the smell, the more noble it is. The court of Philip, Duke of Burgundy, stipulated that courtiers must use aged cheese to cultivate armpit flora, saying that they wanted to brew the fragrance of the land. The Valois dynasty in France was even more outrageous, requiring maids to sew rotten rose petals into their underwear, calling it the fragrance of death. The most exaggerated was a certain elector of the Holy Roman Empire, who specially built a body odor library to collect parchment soaked in the sweat of the nobles. This operation makes modern perfume museums seem lacking in academic depth. So the question is, when the nobles turn body odor into a symphony, how do ordinary people deal with sweat odor? In 1522, the air in the poor areas of Florence was so thick that it could be used as wall paint. The body odor of ordinary citizens was entirely dependent on God's gift. Blacksmiths had their own charcoal smell. Fishermen exuded the smell of the sea, and the body odor of tanners was enough to scare away wild dogs. A court record shows that a laundrywoman was convicted of smell theft for using the foot washing water of a noble lord to wipe her body. This is probably the earliest case of intellectual property infringement. Even worse were the ascetics in the monastery. They were required to glorify God with body odor, and as a result, many of them practiced the skill of using the smell of their armpits to drive away mosquitoes, which could be called human mosquito coils. Speaking of social changes caused by body odor, we have to mention the most absurd air property rights in the Middle Ages. In 1418, Paris promulgated the Odor Management Ordinance, which stipulated that olfactory pollution fees must be paid for emitting odors within a mile of Notre Dame, which gave rise to professional perfumers, using sponges on long poles to clear the way for nobles to remove odors. A British baron was even more outrageous. He claimed that airflow within the territory belongs to feudal rights, and wanted to collect a breathing tax from every pedestrian who passed downwind from his castle. The most exaggerated is the smell voting law of the Venetian Senate. Whether a bill is passed or not depends on the members' likes and dislikes of the proposer's body odor. As a result, everyone caught a cold during a vote, and the bill was passed by drawing lots. When Europeans were arguing over the standard of body odor, the intervention of the church made things even more incredible. Some monasteries required monks to rub their armpits with the remains of saints, saying that they could obtain holy body odor, but many people were infected with strange skin diseases. There was also a bishop who invented the exorcism ointment, which used moldy holy cakes mixed with mercury to smear the whole body, successfully turning the exorcism ceremony into a heavy metal poisoning scene. The most outrageous is the holy sweat ceremony of a certain pope, which requires 7 cardinals to exercise collectively until they sweat profusely, and then use a gold-plated spoon to collect sweat to make holy oil. This operation makes modern healthcare product pyramid schemes feel ashamed. Let's see the craziest body odor black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1486, it became popular in Milan to use Egyptian mummy powder to regulate body odor, which turned the upper-class dance into an archaeological site. A German doctor invented the odor distiller, which was to lock the patient in a steamer to extract the essence of life, resulting in a large amount of human flesh soup. A French noble designed a mobile fragrance tent, in which 12 boys and girls used fans to accurately direct body odor to guests. These inventions prove that humans' absurd creativity in body odor management is always 7 centuries ahead of the development of chemistry. The terminator of this body odor revolution is ridiculous. It was the Black Death. When the plague swept across Europe, people suddenly discovered that the most mellow, aristocratic body odor was also the most active in spreading the virus. The notes of a Florentine doctor in 1527 showed that the mortality rate of the rich who used perfume to cover up the stench of corpses was 3 times that of the poor. What's more ironic is that when the nobles were obsessed with the art of body odor, the real perfume craft was booming in the Arab world. Just like modern people buying air purifiers and spraying cologne at the same time, human olfactory vanity is always self-contradictory. When we see those gem-studded scented fans in museums, don't forget the real history behind them, the gas proof of class solidification. the olfactory battlefield of power games, and the bacterial culture dish of human vanity. Today's signature perfumes of celebrities and the royal sweat fragrance of medieval nobles are essentially identity labels, except that we have replaced the gilded fans with glass bottles. Next time you try a new perfume, remember, 500 years ago, your ancestors might have been ecstatic to get a sweaty handkerchief from the Lord, because the body odor carrier at that time could prove your social relationship better than today's social media. Just as European nobles were arguing over the standards of body odor, another more secret body function was undergoing aristocratic transformation, the medieval theology of dandruff. Imagine an archbishop who has just completed holy body odor conditioning and is now having his attendants use an ivory comb to collect the snowflakes of dandruff on his shoulders, while jewelers are arguing over how to inlay them into the reliquary. This brings up a body politics that is more subtle than body odor. In an era where even metabolic products are divided into sacred and secular, dandruff can exude the solemnity of a papal bull. In the winter of 1521, the Vatican held an unprecedented religious conference to discuss whether the dandruff falling from Pope Leo X's shoulders was sacred. This holy dandruff debate, that lasted for 3 months, ended with the Pope's hair-combing ceremony being upgraded to the 8th sacrament, in addition to the 7 sacraments, marking that the medieval church had developed metabolic products to an outrageous theological height. As for what the real holy particles are, modern dandruff advertisements are as unimaginative as laundry detergent advertisements in front of medieval holy dandruff studies. Let's walk into the dressing room of King François I of France in 1530, where the scalp care process is more sophisticated than alchemy. The dandruff management of top aristocrats follows the Trinity rule. First, massage the scalp with a silver comb, then catch the dandruff with a velvet tray, and finally seal it in a glass bottle inlaid with gems. According to a secret report from a Venetian ambassador, Henry VIII of England almost launched a religious reform in advance because Anne Boleyn mocked his royal snowflakes for not being fluffy enough. This is not a personal hygiene issue, but a doctrinal debate plus political murder. The most absurd thing about this dandruff worship is that the more exaggerated the amount of dandruff, the more noble it is. Charles, Duke of Burgundy, formulated the Palace Dandruff Standard, which stipulates that at least 20 visible dandruff pieces must be produced per square inch of shoulder area per minute. Pope Paul III was even more outrageous, requiring cardinals to use a magnifying glass to measure the diameter of the candidate's dandruff. The most exaggerated is a certain Spanish archduke, who specially built a sacred dandruff museum to collect family holy images made of dandruff from ancestors of all generations. This operation makes modern DNA identification seem lacking in ritual sense. So the question is, when the nobles turned dandruff into a collection, how did the common people deal with itchy scalps? Time came to the slums of Florence in 1545, where dandruff was as free as snow in winter. Farm women could use dandruff to spell out family initials on bread, and barbers invented the dandruff fortune-telling technique. A court file records that a hat maker was convicted of stealing human sacred objects for collecting customers' dandruff to make portrait reliefs. This is probably the earliest case of bioinformation theft. Even worse are the novice monks in the monastery. They were asked to write scriptures with dandruff, and as a result, many of them mastered the skill of sticking parchment with scalp oil, which can be called human glue sticks. Speaking of social unrest caused by dandruff, we have to mention the most magical dandruff economy in the Middle Ages. In 1432, Venice promulgated the dandruff trade law, which stipulated that the collection of noble dandruff must pay a sacred material tax, which gave rise to professional dandruff collectors using gold-plated vacuum cleaners to work on noble seats. A German elector was even more outrageous. He claimed that all dandruff in the territory contains fragments of the Lord's soul and would be taxed by the piece. The most exaggerated is the dandruff securities market in Flanders, where merchants packaged the noble dandruff that could be collected in the next 10 years into futures trading. This financial innovation makes modern Bitcoin look like barter. When Europeans were arguing over the ownership of dandruff, the intervention of the church made things even more surreal. Some monasteries required monks to keep all the dandruff from shaving to make penance calendars. There were also bishops who invented exorcism head oil, which used moldy holy water mixed with mercury to apply to the scalp, successfully turning the exorcism ceremony into a heavy metal rock scene. The most amazing is the holy scratching ceremony of a certain pope, which requires 3 cardinals to scratch the pope's head at the same time, and then use gold foil to catch the falling holy dandruff. This operation makes modern scalp care advertisements seem lacking in imagination. Let us see the craziest dandruff black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1498, Milan became popular with Egyptian mummy scalp powder to treat dandruff, and as a result, the heads of the nobles became archaeological sites. French doctors invented the dandruff collection helmet, which uses adhesive tape to collect dandruff, causing many people's hair to be pulled out by the roots. A British nobleman designed a holy crumb music box, and the falling dandruff would trigger the strings to emit angel sounds. These inventions prove that humans' absurd creativity in the use of dandruff is always 8 centuries ahead of medical common sense. Ironically, the terminator of this dandruff revolution was printing. When people found that parchment was more suitable for recording text than dandruff, the once priceless Holy Crumb Scroll suddenly became a laughingstock. The notes of a Florentine scholar in 1550 showed that the sacred filter made of noble dandruff to filter wine tasted worse than ordinary gauze. What's even more ridiculous is that when the church was obsessed with the sacrament of dandruff, the real holy relic identification technology was budding in the laboratory. Just like modern people buying anti-dandruff shampoo while collecting celebrity autographs, the objects of human worship always swing between rationality and absurdity. When we see those dandruff-studded reliquaries in museums, don't forget the real history behind them: biological evidence of class solidification, the keratin battlefield of power games, and the sebum secretions of human vanity. Today's scalp management live broadcasts by internet celebrities and the holy dandruff display ceremony of medieval nobles are essentially status performances, except that we have replaced the gold-plated tray with a 4K camera. The next time you see snowflakes of dandruff falling on your shoulders, remember, 500 years ago, your ancestors might have been holding a Thanksgiving ceremony for getting a piece of dandruff from the Lord, because the body metabolites at that time could prove your social status better than the likes on social media today. While the European Church was arguing over the sanctity of dandruff, another more secretive body indicator was becoming an identity code: medieval elbow heraldry. Imagine a count who had just completed a perfect kneeling and was now asking a tattoo artist to draw a miniature family crest on the folds of his left elbow. While the ceremony officials were arguing over how much gold powder to use for this pattern, this led to a power game that was more flexible than the knee, an era in which even elbow calluses were classified into aristocratic models, and the folds of the joints were filled with vassal lists. In 1723, an incredible heraldry debate broke out in the court of the Duke of Orleans, the regent of France. The cause was that a marquise was found to have an extra iris on the family crest on the inside of her right elbow than the regulations allowed. This dispute, known as the Elbow Pit War, ended with the promulgation of the Versailles Elbow Heraldry Code, marking the Bourbon dynasty's inclusion of the most inconspicuous folds of the human body into the power map. To say what is the real identity brand, the tattoo culture of modern society is as childish as a child's sticker game in front of the medieval elbow heraldry. Let's roll up our sleeves and observe the elbow decoration ceremony of Frederick William I, King of Prussia in 1730. The level of sophistication here is comparable to the assembly of a watchmaker's tourbillon. The elbow emblems of top nobles must follow the Triple Crown standard. First, clean the skin folds with brandy, then use a hummingbird feather pen dipped in molten gold to outline, and finally use spider silk mixed with pearl powder to fix the color. According to a secret letter from a Russian ambassador, King August II of Poland once declared a state of emergency in the country because the coat of arms on his left elbow faded. But it turned out that the queen had rubbed him too hard with the newly bought Venetian soap. This is not a skin decoration, but a moving territorial declaration plus political performance art. The most ironic thing about this elbow worship is that the more hidden the position, the more powerful it is. The Hanoverian dynasty in the United Kingdom stipulated that cabinet members must have miniature national emblems tattooed on their elbows, which turned the summer parliament into a spectacle of collective sleeve rolling up. Russian Empress Anna was even more outrageous. She required her maids to match their daily dresses with the color of their elbow emblems, which gave rise to professional elbow fashion consultants, unlucky people who held color cards under the armpits of nobles for comparison. The The most exaggerated is the Elbow Heraldry Library, built by the Elector of Saxony, which used pure silver to press the elbow fold models of all vassals. This operation makes modern human body scanning technology seem lacking in aristocratic sentiment. So the question is, when the powerful use elbows as heraldry display boards, how do ordinary people deal with their elbows? Time came to the dock area of Amsterdam in 1740, where elbows were as practical as multifunctional tools. Porters used elbows to knock open cargo boxes. Chefs used elbows to test furnace temperatures, and thieves even invented elbow unlocking to pry open most door locks without tools. A court record shows that a tailor was convicted of peeping into state secrets for peeping at the elbow emblem of an aristocratic customer. This is probably the earliest case of commercial espionage. Even worse were the monastery's copyists, who were required to flatten parchment with their elbows. As a result, many of them had reliefs of the first letters of the Bible on their left elbows, which can be called the most pious skin marks in history. Speaking of social changes caused by elbows, we have to mention the most absurd elbow tax in the Middle Ages. In 1678, Venice promulgated the elbow covering decree, stipulating that prostitutes must cover their left elbow emblems with lead powder, giving rise to professional elbow retouchers, craftsmen who work in embarrassing parts with special mortar. A pasha of the Ottoman Empire was even more outrageous. He claimed that the number of elbow wrinkles reflects wisdom and divided official ranks according to the number of lines. The most exaggerated is the elbow futures, invented by Dutch merchants, which securitized the expected elbow skin looseness of aristocratic children. This financial innovation makes modern stock options look conservative. While Europeans were arguing over elbow standards, the addition of science made things even more magical. Some universities offered elbow physiognomy, claiming that the thickness of the elbow cuticle could predict the grain harvest. A German doctor invented an elbow distiller, claiming that it could extract noble body fluids, but the result was that even laboratory cockroaches avoided the boiled stuff. The most amazing thing was a certain pope's holy elbow treatment, which required 7 cardinals to take turns stimulating the elbows of believers with gold needles, saying that it was to activate the energy nodes left by angels, an operation that makes modern acupuncture clinics feel ashamed. Let's see the craziest elbow black technology in the Middle Ages. In 1699, the Palace of Versailles became popular with saints' elbow skin powder to treat dermatitis, causing the aristocratic salon to become a religious artifact exhibition. French doctors invented the elbow shaper, which uses an iron frame to fix the ideal bending angle, resulting in a large number of joint stiffness. A Persian noble designed a talking elbow ring with a built-in microphonograph device that can recite family trees when waving. These inventions prove that human beings' imagination in elbow decoration is always ahead of practical medicine for 13 centuries. The terminator of this elbow craze is ridiculous: the emergence of suits. When 3-piece suits became the standard for European gentlemen, the nobles suddenly found that no one could see the most expensive elbow art. In 1755, a British fashion magazine lamented, "The coat of arms hidden under the woolen cloth is like a theater without an audience." What's more ironic is that when the powerful are obsessed with elbow politics, the real industrial revolution is being dragged down by these inconvenient artistic elbows. Just like modern people complain about the restraint of suits while insisting on attending formal attire, human formalism is always self-contradictory. When we see those gem-studded elbow guards in museums, don't forget the real history behind them: the skin penetration of power games, the flesh engraving of class oppression, and the wrinkled proof of human vanity. Today's elbow tattoos of internet celebrities and the elbow pits of heraldry of medieval nobles are essentially identity labels, except that we have replaced gold powder tattoos with fluorescent ink. The next time your elbow hits the corner of the table, please remember, 280 years ago, your ancestors might have been ecstatic to get a piece of dead skin from the Lord's elbow, because the skin scraps at that time could prove your social circle better than today's business cards. When we look back at the absurd body function aristocratization movement in the Middle Ages, we will find that humans have always been champions of running marathons with their butts naked in the track of vanity. From gilded toilets to sacred dandruff, from tuning burps to fermenting body odor, These seemingly funny historical fragments piece together a magic mirror. What is reflected in the mirror is the never-satisfied class anxiety, the pathological section of the desire for power, and the most exquisite identity performance completed by humans with the most primitive physiological functions. Just like modern people who laugh at medieval nobles for wiping their butts with live pigeons while installing Bluetooth speakers on smart toilets, we are simply wrapping the same vanity in technology. Think about it. If one day archaeologists unearth the holy objects of our time, beauty eggs used by internet celebrities, microphones chewed by anchors, billionaire anti-hair loss combs, will future students also write study on confusing human behavior in the 21st century while shaking their heads like we do now? After all, we may never really surpass this absurd creativity of turning excretion into art, body odor into luxury goods, and metabolism into religious rituals. We just replaced the gold-plated chamber pot with a gold-plated mobile phone, and the spice-pickled underwear with a trendy brand with a logo. So here comes the question. When we sneered at the gem-studded ear picks of medieval nobles in front of the glass cabinets of the museum, did we remember for a moment the smart comb we ordered yesterday, which claimed to collect dandruff for DNA analysis? When we ridicule the ancients for using the sound of sneezes to divide classes, have we noticed that in the modern workplace, even the taste of coffee has become an identity code? Since when did humans simplify the philosophical proposition of who am I into a physiological exhibition of what do I excrete, emit, and fall off? Now, it's your turn to speak. Tell me in the comments section, what do you think archaeologists will interpret the most ridiculous class code from our current daily necessities 600 years later? Is it the wear and tear on the soles of limited edition sneakers? Or the lipstick marks on the bottom of the cups of internet celebrity cafes? Or perhaps, we have already invented a more absurd identity symbol than holy dandruff, but we are deeply trapped in it without knowing it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the next issue, we will unlock a more bizarre historical copy, the farting music examination system in the Middle Ages, and see how humans turned rectal gas into an elegant art that requires a 7-year apprenticeship.